Freud didn't just invent psychoanalysis. He uncovered something far more dangerous, more primal, a forbidden map etched in the unconscious, charting not merely the mind, but the deepest caverns of female desire. Not the sanitized kind discussed in psychology textbooks or glossed over in university lectures. This was something darker, raw, a pattern so unsettling that even his most loyal followers sought to suppress it, bury it beneath layers of palatable theory. And yet, here it lies, breathing just beneath the surface of every interaction, every seduction, every moment where logic loses power and instinct takes over. Imagine for a moment that this map holds the answers generations of men have searched for in vain. A silent code explaining not what women say they want, but what truly compels them, magnetizes them, repeatedly, irrationally. Forget romance novels and self-help mantras. Behind the curtain of political correctness and modern niceties exists a primal rhythm that governs female behavior with terrifying consistency. A rhythm that grants an unfair advantage to those who can hear it. And yet most men remain deaf, not because they lack intelligence, but because they were fed illusions. Be yourself. Be kind. Treat her like a queen. Love conquers all. But if that were true, why do courthouses overflow with divorce papers? Why does loneliness spread like a modern plague? Why do men move like ghosts through relationships they cannot understand, forever chasing something that slips just out of reach? The truth was always close, hidden in the margins of Freud's most dangerous writings. Not the well-known ideas like the Oedipus complex or the anal stage, but private lectures, whispered in candlelit rooms of Vienna, where Freud laid bare a theory so volatile, so surgically precise in its dissection of female instinct, that it had to be hidden. He wasn't writing for fame or applause. He was documenting patterns, cold, ruthless patterns of behavior that even modern psychology hesitates to touch. Beneath every smile, every silence, he found not emotion, but strategy. Not romance, but power dynamics. A game older than language, encoded in biology. One case shattered all illusions, the aristocrat known as the wolf woman. Outwardly, she embodied grace, purity, the cultivated charm of nobility. But behind closed doors, she manipulated men with almost supernatural precision. She would envelop them in warmth, only to disappear for days without a trace. Her absence wasn't neglect, it was a weapon. Her unpredictability, a spell. Freud traced the origins of her patterns back to childhood. At 6 years old, she had watched her mother dismantle her father, not with violence, but with perception. She learned that power wasn't taken by force. It was earned through the control of attention, the denial of certainty, the dance of granting and withholding. Freud wrote, "What she denies becomes her weapon. What she withholds, her throne." As that line didn't just rewrite how he saw women, it rewired his entire understanding of desire. He began to perceive female attraction not as a matter of morality or romance, but as polarity. A pull between safety and chaos, between stability and danger. Not the choice between a good man and a bad one, but a gravitational tension between comfort and conquest. That polarity, once triggered, could transform even the calmest woman into a storm of unpredictability. She didn't seek peace. She followed the pulse of the story. The tension between knowing and not knowing, presence and absence. Because deep in her subconscious, what she craved wasn't simply love. It was narrative, suspense, the feeling of being moved, provoked, transformed. And this realization shook the foundations of social belief. Because if desire could be engineered, if romance could be designed like a psychological script, then love itself was not sacred. It was strategic. Freud saw it all before science could measure it. Today, Neuroscience confirms what he only sensed. Studies in behavioral psychology now show that emotional unpredictability activates the same reward systems in the brain responsible for addiction, obsession, and craving. In 2012, the University of Texas found women are 52% more likely to engage with men who display controlled unpredictability. Not chaos, but rhythm. Moments of warmth punctuated by absence. Delayed replies. A glance held too long, or not at all. This isn't manipulation. It's biology. Predictability soothes, but unpredictability compels. Another study, published in the Journal of Social Psychology, revealed something even more primal. Women find men more attractive when they believe other women want them, even if those men are objectively less attractive. Her brain isn't scanning for perfection. It's scanning for perceived value. Evolution taught her to desire what others desire. It's not shallowness. It's survival. And most men, they're playing checkers on a chessboard, confusing kindness for seduction, predictability for power. But women? Women are strategists of emotional resonance, every word calibrated, every silence measured. She's not reacting emotionally. She's scanning, assessing, mapping your consistency, your frame, your availability. But here's the shift. Once you recognize the game, you stop being the pawn. You start becoming the player. Freud eventually confessed that there was a second, deeper layer to female desire, so mysterious, so opaque, that he hesitated to write about it at all. He called it the shadow cycle, a biological rhythm not governed by thought, but by instinct. Not conscious strategy, but a poetic, terrifying symmetry of fear and longing, pain and pleasure, tension and release. It guides her like gravity, always pulling her toward what she consciously resists. The man she knows is wrong for her, but can't stop thinking about. The relationship that feels like chaos, but tastes like oxygen. This was Freud's most disturbing truth. What a woman says she wants and what she responds to are often not just different. They are opposite. Her lips may speak of kindness, understanding, and stability, but her nervous system lights up in the presence of chaos, challenge, and dominance. The paradox is brutal. Her mind seeks peace. Her body craves the storm. The most damning proof came in 1901. A countess, born into unimaginable wealth and status, left her husband, a man who gave her everything, for a commoner with nothing. Her husband adored her, obeyed her, worshipped her. But he was predictable. She could read him like a book. And boredom is the death of desire. The lover, on the other hand, was indifferent, elusive. His absence burned. His silence echoed. And in that echo, her shadow cycle awakened. The subconscious magnetism toward what she could not control, could not predict, could not possess. Freud began to see the pattern everywhere. Women despising submissive men, yet obsessing over those who refused to bend. Because her subconscious does not crave love that is given. It craves love that must be earned. Affection that costs something. Attention that feels like conquest. When love becomes easy, the story dies. But when she must fight for it, it becomes her oxygen. And modern science, once again, affirms what Freud saw without machines. Dopamine, the molecule of desire, does not spike with affection. It spikes with anticipation. Suspense, not satisfaction, is the true engine of attraction. The Journal of Evolutionary Psychology found women significantly more drawn to men who are selectively emotionally unavailable. It's not coldness, it's control. The less accessible your attention, the more value it holds. Scarcity creates magnetism. Rarity becomes worship. But Freud saw the darker side too, the testing mechanism, that unconscious drive in women to provoke conflict, seek weakness, push buttons, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. To test the frame, to see whether the man will break, collapse, beg. Because only then can she measure his emotional strength. Only then can she trust that his energy is stronger than hers. And those who falter lose value. But those who remain unmoved, they trigger something ancient. Masculine stillness becomes gravity in the face of her storms. Cleopatra mastered this truth long before Freud could put words to it. She ensnared Julius Caesar and Mark Antony not through submission, but through chaos wrapped in charisma. Her seduction wasn't softness, it was challenge. She offered glimpses of paradise only to vanish into shadows. She made them chase illusions, fight storms, lose themselves in the labyrinth of her mystery. Her beauty wasn't her power. It was the emotional volatility she commanded, the narrative she crafted. One moment, warmth. The next, withdrawal. That rhythm didn't just attract, it enslaved. And Freud understood, it's not kindness that builds obsession. It's polarity. Polarity demands distance. Chivalry fails, not because it's wrong, but because it removes suspense. There is no chase, no friction, no unpredictability. The good man offers peace, but peace doesn't electrify the nervous system. It numbs it. Passion cannot live in still water. It feeds on current, on movement, on contrast. And Freud, having mapped the primal layers of attraction, stumbled into something deeper still. A third dimension, a psychological lever capable of triggering addiction so profound, so unexplainable, that women themselves often didn't understand its origin. He called it the addiction protocol, not manipulation, not deceit, but mastery over rhythm. A pattern of reinforcement so precise it bypassed reason and rewired instinct. The brain, after all, doesn't crave what it understands. It craves what it anticipates, what it cannot fully predict. One of Freud's most startling cases was that of a world-renowned opera singer, adored by crowds, admired by high society, who threw it all away. Her wealth, her fame, even her family, for a struggling poet who treated her with cold indifference. Her friends called her mad, but to her, he was oxygen when he's with me. She whispered, "I feel alive. When he leaves, I feel empty." Freud's diagnosis was as simple as it was devastating: intermittent reinforcement. The poet didn't flood her with attention. He offered it unpredictably, in waves. A kind word here, silence for days, a passionate night followed by absence. And in that rhythm, he became not a man, but a drug. Her body began to chase the high, to crave the emotional spike, to obsess over the next appearance, the next message, the next spark. Her nervous system stopped caring about his flaws. It just wanted the next hit. Modern neuroscience now confirms what Freud only sensed through instinct. A 2014 Harvard study showed that the brain responds more intensely to unpredictable rewards than to consistent ones. The same circuits that make slot machines addictive, the dopamine loops of uncertainty, are activated by emotionally inconsistent relationships. Desire is not about getting what you want. It's about not knowing when you'll get it. Anticipation becomes more powerful than satisfaction. The brain doesn't fall in love with the person. It bonds with the pattern. The trick lies in controlling that rhythm. Give too much, she grows bored. Too little, and she detaches. But just enough warmth, just enough absence creates obsession. The nervous system begins to bond not with affection, but with the alternating current of tension and relief. And it's in this cycle that the deepest imprint is made. Freud realized that this wasn't about seduction anymore. This was about identity, about transformation. Because when a woman crosses that line, when desire turns into dependence, something changes. She no longer sees you as a man. You become a state of mind, a mirror reflecting her most heightened self. You awaken something primal, something addictive, something that rewrites how she experiences herself. She doesn't just crave your presence, she craves the feeling of herself in your presence. That vitality, that spark, that electric edge that no other man can replicate. And the deeper this imprint goes, the more irreversible it becomes. Freud described it in his private, rarely published notes as psychosexual imprinting, a phenomenon where emotional intensity embeds itself so deeply in the subconscious that no future logic, no distance, no external voice can sever the connection. The relationship is no longer voluntary, it's reflex. She stops loving you as a person and begins craving you as a condition. One of his most haunting cases involved a woman hopelessly attached to a man who openly mistreated her. Friends begged her to leave. Family pleaded. Opportunities came and went. But she stayed. Freud asked her why, and she answered with something that chilled him to the bone. "When I'm with him, I feel like myself." It wasn't abuse. It was identity. He had become the ritual through which she accessed her own emotional extremes, her storms, her awakenings. And this, Freud feared, was a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. Because once a woman's nervous system binds to chaos, she will choose it over peace, again and again, not because she's broken, but because her biology has anchored meaning to intensity. And intensity is rare, irreplaceable, addictive. Brain imaging now shows that love and fear activate the same neural pathways. When a woman feels both in a relationship, the bond becomes unbreakable. It's the paradox of passion. It's not comfort that cements desire. It's contrast. In 2016, Yale psychologists discovered that emotional upheaval during the early stages of a relationship leads to significantly stronger long-term bonding. Not the fairy tale kind, the kind where you argue, cry, burn, reconcile, the kind that sears memory into the body. The more suffering she endures early, the more her brain assigns value to the connection. It becomes worth the pain. Because struggle implies significance. She doesn't remember what felt safe. She remembers what felt alive. Freud believed there was a window, between 3 and 6 months, where this transformation becomes irreversible. If a man can guide her through this emotional stormscape with rhythm and control, her nervous system bonds him to intensity. After that, no man who offers mere peace will compare. Her biology won't allow it. Her body begins to hurt in his absence more than it heals in his presence. And that shift, that mark, cannot be undone. Because the memory doesn't live in the mind. It lives in the nerve endings, the breath, the pulse. The great seducers of history all understood this without a single psychology degree. Casanova disappeared for weeks only to return with a letter that shattered the soul. Every absence a build-up, every return a detonation. He didn't just speak to women, he imprinted them. Napoleon's letters to Josephine bled with obsession, rage and tenderness in the same breath. One line worshipped her, the next threatened to forget her, and that emotional whiplash became her religion. Because women don't fall for men, they fall for sensation, for the kaleidoscope of emotion that spins them into chaos and then delivers them into calm, only to spin again. They fall for the contrast, for the man who can make them feel 10 things in a single evening, the one who pulls them into tension, then cradles them in relief. That contrast isn't abuse, it's narrative. And narrative is what the female mind chases when logic sleeps. So how do you use this without becoming cruel? You learn to craft experience. You learn rhythm. If you always reply instantly, slow down. Let the silence stretch. Let it speak. If you always suggest plans, hold back. Let curiosity rise. Let absence do what words cannot. Be kind, but not complacent. Present, but not permanent. Warm, but with a chill at the edge. Give her something to miss, because only when she misses you does she measure you, and in every great seduction there comes a tipping point, a moment when interest becomes obsession, when the story she's living with you becomes more vivid than the life she lived before you. That's the moment Freud marked as irreversible, not because of magic, but because emotion, repeated with intensity, becomes identity. It burns itself into the psyche. It bypasses logic and anchors itself in ritual. She stops seeing the world without you, not because she needs your love, but because she needs the story only you can write inside her nervous system. That's the key Freud left buried, not in textbooks or classrooms, but in the pulse of lived experience. A woman doesn't crave the man who gives her the most. She craves the man who makes her feel the most, who becomes not a provider of comfort, but a conductor of electricity. And that electricity must never ground out into predictability, because the moment your presence becomes routine, the imprint begins to fade. The spell dissolves. What once ignited her now becomes invisible, not because she stopped caring, but because her nervous system stopped responding. You must never let the rhythm become monotony. What seduces is not volume, but voltage. The shock of contrast, the play between intensity and restraint. Sensory memory, the kind that haunts, that lingers, that binds, is built on contrast, not repetition. Her body remembers the night you disappeared, just as much as the one you held her close. It remembers the silence as vividly as the moan. It's not the sweetness that stays, it's the sharpness. The moment she felt out of control, then rescued. The chaos, then calm. That is what she replays when you're gone. That is what she tries to recreate with men who can never measure up. Because once she has felt this, truly felt it, everything else will seem flat, lifeless, incomplete. And here lies the greatest danger of all. Once you learn to control the rhythm, you stop chasing connection. You begin to command it. Not through force, not through words, but through emotional architecture. Through sculpting experience like a composer writes a symphony. Because women don't remember words. They remember sensations, moments of piercing aliveness, emotional crescendos, the rise and fall of your presence like music in their veins. And once her body learns your rhythm, you don't need to convince her of your value. Her own biology will betray her. Freud came to understand that the most unforgettable men were not the ones who made promises. They were the ones who provoked transformation, who changed how a woman saw herself, who gave her not safety, but a mirror, one that reflected her most primal, emotional, and untamed self. The woman she cannot become on her own. The woman awakened only through storm, through story, through contrast. That version of her, the one she glimpses only in your presence, becomes the true object of her desire. You become the trigger, the symbol, the catalyst. And once that identity is bonded to your energy, she doesn't just love you, she needs you to feel like herself. This isn't manipulation. It's not cruelty. It's the most profound psychological truth that society refuses to face. That passion is not born in peace. It is born in polarity, in suspense, in not knowing what comes next, in the moments where her breath catches, where her logic fails, where her instinct takes the wheel. That's when love becomes dangerous and real. Because once a woman feels that high, nothing else compares. No other man satisfies. No relationship soothes. Not because you were perfect, but because you made her feel everything. The great seducers were not charismatic because of charm. They were unforgettable because of contrast. They became rituals. Their absence was its own kind of presence. Their silence echoed like music. Their unpredictability wasn't cruelty. It was rhythm. Every glance, every word, every withdrawal carefully measured to stretch emotion like a bow before the release. And when that arrow struck, it didn't hit the mind. It hit the soul. So how do you become that kind of man? Not by learning lines, not by faking disinterest, but by mastering 3 weapons: intensity, contrast, and presence. Intensity floods her system with adrenaline and dopamine, the rush of aliveness that can't be faked. Contrast creates the polarity, the emotional roller coaster that burns memories into the bloodstream. And presence? True presence? It's not just being there. It's being unshakable. The stillness in the eye of her storm. The grounded masculine that holds space while everything else spins. It's not about being hard or cold. It's about being controlled. Letting your absence matter. Letting your silence speak louder than words. Most men fear creating distance. They think affection must be constant. But what is constant becomes invisible. What is rare becomes sacred. You must let her miss you. Let her long. Let her ache. Not to hurt her, but to deepen her bond. To let her nervous system wrap itself around your rhythm like a vine around fire. Because the truth is, women don't chase men. They chase feelings. And the man who becomes the most potent feeling in her life becomes the one she cannot release. He becomes the music she hears in silence, the scent in an empty room, the image she sees behind closed eyes. He becomes synonymous with aliveness itself. And the more intense that feeling, the more unshakable the imprint. She doesn't want to replay the relationship. She wants to relive the sensation, the experience of being seen, shaken, shattered, and reborn. And that is the final level Freud pointed to. The moment when seduction becomes reprogramming. When the woman stops desiring the man as an external being and begins needing him as an internal state, an emotional frequency, a neural loop that plays endlessly in the background of her mind, whether he's present or not. She sees him in strangers, hears him in music, feels him in dreams, not because he's perfect, but because he opened a door in her consciousness that no one else even saw. And that's why men who master this art become unforgettable. Not because they dominate, not because they manipulate, but because they tune themselves to her deepest rhythm, the rhythm she didn't even know she had. They hold the tension. They master the silence. They become the story. And in that story, she discovers a version of herself so vivid, so alive, that she cannot bear to lose it. She will chase that version of herself for years, for decades, even if it means chasing him. This is what Freud uncovered and what society buried. Not a theory, not a myth, a living pattern, a secret architecture behind every failed relationship, every obsessive romance, every impossible bond. And now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The world will try to drag you back into simplicity, into niceness, into bland, predictable connection. But you'll know better. You'll feel the rhythm, the pulse, the power. You were not meant to drift through life half awake, nodding along to lies disguised as wisdom. You were built to see what others fear, to embrace intensity over safety, truth over comfort. Because the world doesn't change when men get louder. It changes when they get clear. when they rise, not as followers, but as mirrors of power, presence, and polarity. As architects of emotion, as sculptors of story, as the rare few who choose to awaken while others sleep. So ask yourself, will you vanish into routine? Will you die in comfort? Or will you step into the storm and become unforgettable? Because when she remembers you, not your words, not your gifts, not your promises, but the feeling of being alive in your presence, that is the moment you stop being a man and become the memory she cannot escape.